just given intensity of the workload with COVID and, not necessarily the workload of the chair role, but everything else. I would want to make sure that I have the time and space to dedicate to this that it needs, and not kind of agree to something that I'm not able to fully follow through on or kind of give it as much dedicated attention as it needs. And I'm also happy to step aside and have it be someone who isn't a white guy as well. So totally open. I wanted to kind of like have a conversation with folks first and kind of see if anyone else would be interested. Because I have been happy to kind of be in the vice chair role and will be happy to continue in that way also. The other option that we talked about as a possibility, and I don't know if this would need to be a vote to kind of change the kind of the bylaws or kind of how it's structured, since it is structured as a kind of chair vice chair kind of role, but to do like a co-chair kind of thing, and especially thinking about the transition from the kind of ESTF way it's been set up to the Sustainability Commission and having dedicated roles for the REJC. Wanted to hear from REJC folks around kind of shared leadership in that way also, in terms of having one of those REJC roles be a co-chair role, but wanted to kind of open that conversation before jumping into a vote or kind of agreeing to something like that.
And I don't know if we have Jesus yet, but
Hey y'all, I'm here. I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if y'all can see me, but hi.
yeah, we can see you. And we can hear you. And we can hear you. Can you hear us okay, Jesus?
Yeah.
Great.
So, Jesus, I know we also talked about this, and you guys, I think we're going to talk about it at your retreat, but no pressure if it didn't end up coming up. I know you guys have a lot of cool stuff happening, but I don't know.
I think my question to Vatic is, has it came up?
Has it come up? Where? What do you mean?
So, yeah, and I think part of it was us having conversations with Vatic. I know me, Monica, and April and Sue was able to talk about it on just thinking about like all the like the new opening seats, the different commissions that are there, and like the spaces where the city wants REJC to sit into, and trying to make sure that we're able to do that. I think we do think that we would want like maybe a co-seating. And as far as it got, it really didn't get too far because we didn't get to talk to folks about it. But I know like we were like gonna ask Vatic how they felt about the seating position.
I don't know, since both Julian and Vatic are kind of just hearing about these ideas for the first time today, if we wanted to like let it stew for a month, or if you were feeling like, yeah, I'm really glad you said this, I'm gonna super ask you to nominate me right now, I'm also open to that, but also happy to let it stew.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you for that, because we were supposed to talk about it at the retreat, and the retreat was beautiful, and we didn't get to talk about it. So
I'd be interested to like talk with Julian and talk with the rest of the group, and then see like where like ideas are, and then obviously there are other people in here with like capacity and capabilities. So I'd be interested to like talk about it more to see like what's in the best interest of like moving. But I don't think that today would be a good time to vote, but we should talk about it.
Cool. And we can
thank
also,
you.
Yay. We can also explore some like shared leadership models. I think the ordinance has like a chair vice chair situation, but that doesn't mean other people can't also take on some of the load and things. And I expressed to Julian earlier, like I obviously in stepping down would still be here to be helpful and have like, spreadsheets of our stakeholders that I email and like all the council people and like the topics we've covered. So I would obviously be there to be helpful and sharing. And I should have said, I know I kind of joked at the beginning as soon as possible, but it's been like such an absolute pleasure to work with this team. So it is actually also with like kind of a pretty heavy heart to step down. It's been a really nice time, but just don't feel like I can continue to give it what it needs, and also feel like we're at a nice pivot point where the ordinance is passed, where I was really hoping we could all sit through it before I sit down, but I'll keep working on that from the outside. We can keep working on that, but, it feels like we're at a nice pivot where some new focus might be nice. Okay, so why don't we, hold this, vote for next time, for the notes, and, next time we can also likely add in, we have 2 applicants now for open seats, and I think we'll have at least one more, so I can share that around ahead of time next time. There was one person who I know is gonna apply, but they were, ill last week, and so they just didn't have time to fill it out, and so I didn't wanna rush it, because I think they'd be a really strong candidate, so, we can include that next time as well.
Can we also include if we're exploring kind of like the shared governance models or that kind of thing, some kind of, information to look at or kind of, models to look at that are best practices or proposals from, kind of how that could work, especially in terms of the role of REJC in relationship to the commission, and if there's any additional vote that would need to be taken to kind of adjust what's in the ordinance to be able to make it official in that way, that we make sure that have that on the agenda too.
Yeah, that's a good.
Does anyone else on the commission have any interest in stepping into whether it's chair, vice chair, co-chair, leadership role kind of thing? Just wanted to get people kind of be like, I'd consider that, to make sure that we're not going on to the next thing before asking.
I can share that I know Carlos had thought about it at one point, and then I think this time has been proving challenging, so expressed regret that he couldn't be here today, but expressed how important this is, and so that could be something to check in next time too. Both his interest and also, or we can check in the meantime too, but his interest and also if there, we used to meet Tuesdays at 8 or something, or 8:30, we switched to Mondays at 4, because that was the time that worked best for the crew at a time. It might be that this isn't the optimal time for the crew we have now, so that's something we can, check in on as well.
And I'll add, I like the idea of figuring out how to distribute and share responsibilities more, because it is a big undertaking to chair something, and thank you so much, Sue, for doing it for such a long period of time. So I like the idea of figuring out what the best motto is moving forward based on our goals. And I will say for 2022, I'm happy to be as supportive as possible to whoever the co-chairs are, vice chairs. I think it's crazy to say 2023, but maybe going into 2023, I would be happy to play a more sort of active leadership role, but I know that based on the work that I have right now, I wouldn't be able to do that in 2022. Nor do I know yet, because I'm so new to the commission, if I would be the best person to play a leadership role.
I generally want to sign you up for everything, because you're like the most effective person I know, but also know that everyone does that. Everyone's got 2023. Yeah. 2023.
Oh, should I have said 2024?
Anything else folks want to say about this, or it'll be, and maybe our next meeting, we should spend a fair amount of time just talking about, like, new members in commission and how we operate. I feel like for a while I hadn't put things like that on the agenda, because I feel like there was like a 2-year span in like 2017 where like that's like all we did was like talk like internal, like looking at ourselves, and so I think I was like hesitant. But time has passed. Amelia remembers this. But I think it's time for us to kind of think through that, and the November meeting will also be a time to celebrate. It'll be the Office of Sustainability's 10-year anniversary, so it'll be kind of nice.
One thing about the chair, vice chair thing I'm thinking about is, I feel like there are 2 major responsibilities for the chair, which is, one is to communicate with all of the members and chair the meetings, and then the other is to like communicate externally to like writing letters, and maybe if we just like focus on those 2 things, we could find people who could do the chairing of the meeting, and then one person who could do like more external communications to city council members or whatever, organize us around communicating externally. Unless there's any other roles or responsibilities I can't really think of.
Yeah, just like planning the meetings and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, the agendas, right. that could be a joint endeavor, I don't know.
I could also, be the person that keeps stakeholders in touch, and I wonder if that would also be an opportunity to think through, like, how, especially in this weird hybrid scenario, like, how it's best to allow the public to participate.
Yeah.
Before and after and during the meetings.
That's a really good idea, Emily. We've been doing like when the agenda gets published, I have a list of people who signed up to be like on our email list, who I email it to. It's also obviously on the portal, so anyone can see it on the portal. But then there's like a list of like 30 or 40 people who get it. But we could definitely expand that differently. Hey, Suze, no need to say sorry. He texted, sorry. Cool. Okay, great, that'll be our, like, a big agenda item for next time. How about we move on to updates from the Office of Sustainability?
All right, we have a long list of updates for everyone. So starting with some upcoming events and announcements, we will be, all this is really gonna be happening in November. So starting with the Repower PVD, our report, the Repower PVD, as a reminder, is our citywide energy challenge for large buildings. So we have a couple winners who have hit the 20% reduction goal. Actually, they pretty much blown it out of the water. So we'll be unveiling that report and celebrating the winner. One of the winners is, only one winner, but there have been others. And then we also are going to be releasing the Compost Report, which many of you contributed to. And we're also, at the same time, going to be unveiling a few new community compost drop-off sites. So there'll be new locations, including Mount Pleasant Library, the commercial strip site where Fearless Fish is. And there's also going to be one, I believe, at Rising Sun.
What was the second one? I missed it.
Where Fearless Fish is.
I don't even know where that is.
It's near like the Planet Fitness.
Yeah, near Planet Fitness.
Oh, yeah.
So there'll be more opportunities for residents to drop off their food scraps. And then we're also going to be unveiling the city's 15 new electric vehicles that have been added to our fleet. So we're going to be getting rid of some of our old vehicles and adding those. And we also have some relatively new charging infrastructure over the public safety garage to support those 15 vehicles.
What kind of vehicles are they? Are they like regular sized vehicles, or are they like?
Yeah, mostly, I think, sedans. We have the list, but.
That was the list of cars being replaced. I thought they were all Nissan Loops. What do you remember?
Hold on, I got the list.
Those were replaced, what was being replaced?
Oh, yeah, they were good,
I think it was Nissan Loops.
And then what department?
It's not approved yet, but, tentatively, a group will go to the inspections and standards. A couple will go to the traffic bureau, some will go to environmental, a couple will go to the parks, two will go to the fire inspector, and then one would go to the director of communications. But that's all theoretical at this point.
Okay, cool.
And it's all based on what are some of, like, how the vehicles will perform, like what sort of driving patterns are best suited.
Oh, cool.
So community choice aggregation, still looking forward to a January launch. There's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes right now, getting ready for that. But really excited to do that and finally get out the door. Also on the C3, we were talking about earlier, so the city is intervening in the Energy Facility Siting Board's decision on the C3 proposal to expand their site. There is a public hearing this Thursday evening in the Ordinance Committee of City Council. And that is related to an ordinance. It's Wednesday at 4.
Oh, it's Wednesday.
Sorry. Wednesday at 4.
Oh, then I can totally go.
I did.
Oh, no, thank you, that's great, Wednesday at 4. And
I'm
there's
sorry,
a-
what was the hearing for?
The C3 proposal is related to, a resolution that the city council has before them on essentially saying their, opinion, that ESPS should do a full review.
ESSB.
I'm sorry, the Energy Facility Siting Board should do a full review.
I wish we could do the review.
Thank you.
We'd be like,
We'd be super efficient.
So yeah, that is at 4 p.m. on the 27th, and it will be in the council chambers. Will those be a virtual?
No, everyone has to come in. That's a public hearing, right? No,
Yeah.
this is just a meeting that I don't know about.
Public hearing? Nope, yeah, I'm looking at it.
are they accept, the public hearing, they accept public comment?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
So if everyone can come in advance and sign in, and then, that's good.
Okay.
Great. Sorry, I cannot email Stephanie on Thursday, my apologies. So yeah, public hearing Wednesday, 4 o'clock here in City Hall. Also, interestingly enough, and we'll kind of get to this, on that same agenda, there's an ordinance being proposed or changed to an ordinance around leaf blowers that would set a threshold for noise in residential neighborhoods for leaf blowers, which, we've been talking in our office about, seeing a lot of other cities have started to ban gas-powered leaf blowers, and all the new ones have to be electric or something of that nature, so, that's also happening at that public hearing. And then, update on our hiring process, for the Climate Justice Policy Associate, we have a final candidate, still in the final stages of that, but we're really excited, hopefully all that works out. Have a great candidate for that position. And I think we mentioned, the 10-year anniversary of the Office of Sustainability is coming up at the end of November. If anyone wants to start a party, that'd be great. I'm available. But yeah, we're kind of brainstorming about ways to acknowledge that milestone, and kind of look back perhaps at what's been accomplished by the Sustainability Commission and the Office of Sustainability over the past 10 years, and also perhaps looking ahead at what we want to achieve in the next 10 years. Comp plan and work around zoning, making some good headway with the planning department on incorporating the climate justice plan into a comp plan. Had a great meeting last week, some good development and progress there. As you may have heard, the zoning board made a decision to not allow Narragansett Improvement Company continue to use a site down there in the port for storing asphalt materials. And it's just another reminder of how important it is for us to be looking at the comprehensive plan and zoning to make sure we're really using that to institutionalize the climate justice plan and codify these land use decisions into our local laws. And then another exciting development, we're moving forward on an RFP for a 30% design study for the PCTA microgrid, or a microgrid at Providence Community Technical Academy, which would provide backup battery storage and solar for that facility. It's also a large emergency shelter, so really important climate resilience component there. So yeah, we're not up to yet, but that's going to be coming. Did you guys see that OER had, the Office of Energy Resources had funding available for microgrids?
Yeah, we participated in a program earlier this year.
Okay.
Where we applied, and I think, I'm not sure exactly what the end result of that was.
Okay.
But, check in again with them to see what is available. At this point, we're gonna be doing the study, and then, following the study, we'll be in a position to actually go out to bid for the project.
Okay,
And so,
that might be what it is.
yeah, and one of the key considerations for us, is whether we actually would obtain a system which we would own, or whether we would lease and have a third-party entity run the system. One of the advantages of doing the lease model is that A, you have people to help you maintain it, but B, you'd be able to benefit from the tax incentives from the project. So it would allow us to build more resilience into the system. So, you know, I think the path forward beyond the study is uncertain, but, you know, that's a key consideration. And a lot of times the funding I've seen out there, including what I heard from OER earlier this year, is like two systems you would buy. So, you know, that might be something we can employ in another project, though, if it was like a smaller aggregate, for sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was talking with Carrie recently, and she mentioned like they had very few applications for like a microgrid program that they had just launched here. Yeah, so.
Question going back to the, comprehensive plan and the zoning board. So I saw the news on that. It was great to see the results. I was only just able to follow up in the articles that kind of like, you know, wasn't there, listening into it. It sounded like at one point in it, there was some discussion that the climate justice plan, even if it were built into the comprehensive plan, wouldn't really apply to this type of facility. So I was wondering kind of if that was just one person's opinion, or if that's like an official position on things, or kind of how that would relate. And then I had another question that you probably can't answer, but was just wondering, now that that decision's been made, you know, you still drive by there and see the asphalt kind of sitting all out. So like what's the enforcement side of things in terms of, were they given a timeline in terms of when they need to remove it? Is there the potential for the city to kind of use some, you know, resource extraction in the form of fines from them in order to get them to comply? Or like what's the follow-up to having that decision kind of follow up, you know, change the conditions?
Yeah, I don't think I can answer either of those questions, unfortunately. The first one, I'm just not clear on what the comment was and what it was referring to. I do know that zoning is, so perhaps it was just coming from the fact that like zoning is forward-looking, so anything and any current use, and if, so say it's currently zoned for pouring asphalt, and then we decide to change the zoning so that's no longer a permitted use, it wouldn't be until that property changed hands that would know, like, and, you know, a new use, they decide to use it for something else. So that might be what they were referring to. But I will look into the timeline for that use ceasing. Okay. And then, are there any other questions on those announcements? And then the other, I think Stu communicated this perhaps in advance, but we're really looking ahead to this next year plus. I think we have some really precious time between now and, say, I think when council goes on recess in August to get some ordinances introduced and get things done in this administration. And would love to just hear from you all any kind of your like ordinance wish list. We still have Barrow, and we're really committed to moving that forward, and Councilwoman Anthony is working very hard. It is sitting in Finance Committee. And we've done some brainstorming internally, and some of the policies that we've talked about are, one, rental registration. This is a policy that is really important to folks in the housing world, especially working on lead. It would require any rental property to register with the city, so enforcement is happening on a proactive basis rather than a reactive. You don't have the fear of retribution if a tenant reports some sort of illicit property or safety hazard. And so just to ensure that we have healthy housing standards that can be evaluated on a proactive basis. So usually there's a rolling sort of, you know, like Boston has a rental registration ordinance, and properties get inspected I think every 5 years on a random basis, something like that. So that's one. The second, we were talking about we're working with the RUAC and Green Justice Zones, and is there a Green Justice Zone ordinance that we want to think about in this timeline? Not sure if that's jumping down there, but just putting a note there. And then we've done a lot of work on pesticide-free and limiting the use of chemicals and pesticides on public land. That's something we should be codifying. Of course, our parks department right now does a really fantastic job of that. It's just because they think it's the right thing to do, but it is nothing that requires them to do that. And then we were talking about some sort of ban on gas-powered lawn equipment, with the leaf blower conversation. So that was what we came up with, our limited brainstorm, but we'd love to hear from you all.
I have two random things that may not be relevant, but I'll just put them out there. One is, it would be a funding thing, so that's always harder, but, like in the forestry, division, there has been a line, or a budget item, or a employment position that has never been filled, of like an apprentice, or some kind of apprenticeship for people who are interested in working for the Parks Department or in the Forestry Division, creating some kind of pipeline for people who are new to the work, and just give them a paid apprenticeship, but it's never been filled, and you know, just, so that's just one idea, like thinking about job opportunities, environmental, or more environmental focus, I guess, and like how the city can support, you know, a pipeline or apprenticeship approach within the city department, for entry-level positions. And then, I'm curious about, when you're talking about the healthy housing, it made me think about another, situation where a commercial property owner in South Providence is trying to take over a house that's like on a piece of property that he wants to buy, that's like in this industrial area, and it's like not a really great place for a house. It's not healthy for the people, but also like what happens to the people when they get displaced from this house. And so I was wondering about that with like lead, with like any kind of housing violations. What is the process for people? I'm just curious, but what is the process for people? And I don't know if there's any ordinance needed for it, but or further thinking about it. But just what happens to people if like their house is condemned because of code violations or eminent domain, and the city takes it over in order for a commercial property owner or whatever. What support do people get to relocate?
A couple sort of also random ideas. Two thoughts came to mind in thinking about the first one, community benefit agreements. And this just takes me back to like the Port of Providence, like when thinking about, for example, offshore wind industry or any current business there or future business, like how do we make sure that we sort of have a way of funding things that community members want around that area. And I think, is it Minneapolis that like had some sort of fund as part of their community agreements? So I think exploring that more, especially with, there goes my paper. Thank you, Julie. The offshore wind industry potential, and like things like also like workforce development around that and apprenticeships, could be part of a community benefits agreement. And then the second thing, going back to the process of developing the climate justice plan and the community leaders program, when thinking about gentrification, like that was something that continued to come up, where, you know, the benefits of making sure that communities are healthy, vibrant, but also the fear of being displaced. So just wondering, like, is there anything that we can do about that to sort of codify that more and strike a balance when we're pushing like solutions in a very comprehensive way and addressing both, like we want to improve, we want to environmentally improve neighborhoods, but we also want to make sure that folks are not displaced. And then the last thing that I'll just say, because I think the housing one, there's a lot of potential there that really makes me excited in terms of could we expand that more and make sure that as affordable housing is being built, that it's also efficient, that we can better integrate all of these things that we want in terms of clean energy and so on.
Sort of in response to Amelia's question, staff required to set up a rental registry and be more proactive about, putting together, actually understanding what the rental policies are and then having the ability to protect tenants that need to file and report their landlord for not complying, and if they do that, I know that there was an article today about class work, and the Attorney General actually taking action against landlords that are not in compliance with the statewide lighting certificate requirements, or not just that, they actually have violations. So there's just a lot of, infrastructure that's in place, but it is also a primary goal of the planning department, having the placement plan.
I like the housing pieces. I think that there is a lot of momentum and energy around housing right now, and kind of aligning with that and kind of making sure that the kind of sustainability piece is, is aligned with the kind of anti-displacement comprehensive plans and the work there. So I do like that one. Kind of building off of what Priscilla was saying earlier, along the lines of I think community benefits agreements are kind of like for new things coming in and how to both incentivize things like offshore wind that we know are good, but also make sure that they're actually benefiting the community. Just because they're good environmentally doesn't mean that they're necessarily good for neighbors in the community. And so building something like that in does make sense. But I think if there's any way to put more pressures on the kind of noxious industrial uses that we know are kind of not in alignment with the climate justice plan, I know there's, a lot of things get grandfathered in, there's limited ways to do that. So maybe thinking creatively about how to kind of put more pressure on that transition, because a lot of the, in order to build out things like offshore wind, there's just not that much space available because so much is taken up by these things that have harmful impacts and kind of unpaid costs to the city and residents there. So if there's any way to codify what those costs are and to get those costs from those who are kind of putting that onto the city. I was thinking about something about vehicles and transportation, and I know a lot of those conversations are happening at the state or regional level right now, but there is some examples of cities kind of getting out in front of that. And thinking about how the state set up tolls to kind of have trucks pay for the damage that they do to the roads in order to fix up the roads. But we know that trucks also cause a lot of damage to people's health, especially children's health, and they're not having to pay for any of that. It's the families that are in the ER that are doing that. So I don't know if there's anything. I know a lot of the roads in that area are state roads, but if there's any way for a city, a low emission zone or zero, some kind of way of kind of both trying to put pressure on those industries there that are causing the harm, but also generating resources and kind of rebalancing some of that to take resources from those polluting industries in order to kind of have a more sustainable source of funding to support the community stuff that's happening. So I don't know, certain, and even another one street sweeping, that's an expensive thing that needs to happen. That whole area there is constantly, littered with bits of scrap metal and bits of road salt and sand and all that kind of stuff from those trucks driving by. And if, it just seems like getting some way to have the companies that, the trucking companies themselves are just hired, so some way of kind of getting it from the source of that, the industries that are kind of requiring the trucks to come in, so it doesn't get put onto the individual truck drivers and things like that. So it's kind of half-baked. I don't know exactly what it would look like, but exploring something along those lines.
So just want to make sure I'm catching it, but sort of exploring ways to extract revenue from polluting industries in order to support mitigation.
Yeah, at the very least doing that and maybe put some pressure on them to kind of transition out of being there long term. Trying to think about what other strategies to do that and ways of tying compensation for the cost that if you're thinking
more about encouraging them to transition.
Right. I know the comprehensive plan goes up, it talks a lot about Providence hosting all these things that create, quote, benefits for the region, but come at a cost to the city. So those costs can be quantified and then put onto those who are creating it.
Can I add on to that?
Yeah.
Is there a way, this is all in my head, is there a way to the thing to like I don't know, charge polluting companies based off of the like the health issue, like the environmentally based health issues that are like in the community. Is there a way to like connect those charges to like the fees around um like you are operating in a community with like high asthma rates and like the highest asthma rates of all of the like state, and so like there is a fee for that, like outside of the like ruining the roads, like is that a thing? Can we make that a thing? What does that look like?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
'Cause
don't
also,
have any.
no, all right,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't need to answer. I think also as part of the like, we also don't want these companies here. Like part of it is having access to like our waterfront, and so Julian got to talk about, just because they do environmental work, that doesn't mean that like we want them in the community, because like their idea of environmental might not connect to what we as a community want. And so like go operate somewhere where there isn't already high asthma rates. Like not that, like not the like not in my backyard, but also the like our backyard is kind of full and we want a little community garden, like we want a little garden in our backyard. And so that's it.
Others, no pressure, I just wanna make sure we're leaving the space. Joni, you wanna share about it? Thank you. One, wanted to like totally thumbs up the gas-powered lawn equipment, and I know Helen's already putting forward restrictions, but like an all-out ban is like,
Yeah. We'll have to think about with that one, like how to make that an equitable policy, certainly, and maybe there's like incentive to trade it in, but you could certainly ban the sale of new ones in Providence, but that doesn't stop someone going to Home Depot and Cranston and buying one.
yeah.
But yeah, I think there's definitely ways to think about phase out, and I don't even know what well, it depends if you are talking about lawnmowers or just leaf blowers, but I don't know, we'd have to do some research on the cost differential, but I don't think it's significant, at least for lawnmowers, but,
And there could be like, I don't know, I'm making this up, but like, we could look into how other cities do it, but like a grants program for like small
Right.
businesses that have to like buy new equipment, or, there could be something that goes along with it.
Yep.
Like,
some cities and towns have done, like trade-in days or whatever, and you can come buy one, and you gotta like bring your old one, kind of like the Cash for Clunkers program under Obama.
Can I add on to the pieces of the leaves?
Yeah.
Is there like, can we, like, what does street cleaning look like for like Providence? Just in the way of like, because I understand the leaf and the leaf blowing and the keeping it all together and getting rid of it, whatever. But I also feel like there's a like deeper layer of like street cleaning. And I think part of that, like I also got to talk to some dude. He was handing out some flyers in the middle of Broad Street, and they were having the clean street, some streets meeting where they were talking to like business owners. It's supposed to be happening soon. They're talking about bringing business owners to the table to talk about what it takes to keep the neighborhood nice and clean. And just in that conversation, when they were talking to the business person, they were like, the business person themselves are like, I should be in charge of like my block, right? Like, and I'm like, you shouldn't. That's a lot to be in charge of. But like for you to be able to take care of your front area. But I think in addition to that is like, how do we keep the streets clean? How does the city like invest in making sure that there's trash cans and things like that out in like Broad Street? those little buses with the little shh on both sides that clean the streets in New York, I think are like dope. And I haven't never seen one in Providence. And so like, what does it
I
look
saw
like?
one probably 2 days ago. I saw one recently too, and I like stopped the car, got I took take photos.
No, where was it?
It was on Chalkstone, so it was on Fifth
Period.
Street.
At like 6 a.m.
Yeah, they're real early, they do, so that's probably why we don't see
So
them
that's
very
probably why I
often.
don't see it.
But they do, sweep the streets, they now, do it twice a month. They get to every street, and of course, on-street parking can get in the way of that, it depends on like, and that's why they do it at that hour. They're also looking ways to expand that.
Yeah. No, I've never seen it. And also like never got a like, hey, don't put your car on the streets. And I've been in New York before. Like I was born in New York. And that's like what they tell me. Like they're like, you can't park on the street this day at this time. Those kinds of things.
It has signs in all the neighborhoods, like you can't park from 5 to 10 on Tuesdays, every other Tuesday.
That might be a great,
That could be like, yeah.
They're piloting that, snow removal thing, they're piloting the allowing street parking during snow, similar, like on the west side, and sort of relates to that, street parking at certain times of day. I was just gonna, add that, like, the lawn care equipment and the gas powered, we haven't really taken a look at what the city's own fleet is, mostly in the Parks Department, it is all gas powered, and funding is a barrier to switching, but they're interested in looking for funding for a pilot program for electric equipment and like trying it out, which would be a good lead by example. And they do, I think what Steve was getting at, like they don't use leaf blowers like in parks, because they mow the leaves like they recommend, but they do use leaf blowers for like paved surfaces, streets, walks, and courts, which we're talking about. I was thinking about like, should we as sustainability officer of the commission estimate for Wednesday's meeting about like the health and environmental concerns of leaf blowers?
Are there any ordinance or ideas coming out of the compost report?
That's a great question, and, I haven't looked at it in a while, so I'm like drawing a blank.
Yeah.
I will look back at that. There's definitely some recommendations for, the need for state policy changes. I will take a look at that.
Yeah, it could be things like, allowing composting in certain zones or.
Yeah, and I think that's something we should think about as we, open up the zoning conversation, and looking at zoning changes, we'll definitely have to.
Is there a difference between like, a leaf blower and a leaf like sucker?
I think there is, yeah.
In terms of it.
Like, I guess as the thing, as an actual tool, so like, oftentimes I'll see people blowing leaves into the street,
Yeah.
and then like, what happens to that if we're not having street sweeping and stuff like that, like it's gonna go into the drains, into the river and stuff. So just thinking about, if you're gonna think about leaf blowers, like maybe it should be another tool that's not gonna be blowing leaves into the street.
Yeah, I think part of the problem, or the criticism of leaf blowers is that it destroys the soil and it creates a lot of dust and air quality issues. I think and also, I think part of the challenge too is that some people move here from other cities where they're told to blow it into the street and they come around and suck it up. And that's like how they manage, or they see at the packet or whatever. That's just, so they probably think they're doing everything, that's not what you're supposed to do, you're actually could get a fine for doing that. I think, getting more information about this, and in our newsletter a couple days ago, we promoted the Leave the Leaves campaign about the benefits of not blowing or collecting the leaves, but just mowing them and letting them decompose in your lawn and garden to help improve soil.
The leaf suckers, I don't know what they're actually called, but it's
A
usually
leaf vacuum, y'all.
Actually, Thank you.
We'll have a place to mow in, like at my last
Yeah.
apartment, there wasn't a place to put the leaves, it was just stagnant. And so you don't want the like moisture of the pavement under the snow, it's like hard to deal with, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, they exist, but typically it's a larger piece of equipment that you'd have to like, it's not for a homeowner kind of thing, or a resident.
Like a.
Yeah, the problem with leaf blowers environmentally is that they're one cycle engines that emit noxious gases that are unhealthy, and the noise problem, so like.
Yeah, they're not great.
So the bigger motors on the trucks aren't equivalent.
Yeah, but I wonder if they make noise. I'm gonna do some research with my team, with our landscape crew.
Deep dive into leaf blowers today.
Yeah, one thing with the leaf vacuums, Jesus, is that they'll pick up anything. So like, then if you're processing the leaves, like we put in our compost, you get like hypodermic needles, or you get trash, or you get other things.
Discarded masks.
Yeah, the new trash, the new litter.
Well, one thing I thought was interesting about the ordinance is that it only applies to residential zones. So you can actually regulate this way that's just targeting residential areas, which would leave, the large properties that are being commercially managed out of the equation, which, on one hand makes things easier, because I think the technology is there for the residential scale.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it's quite there on the commercial scale landscaping, so it could be a good starting point.
And would it look different if we're talking to like commercial landowners versus like residential?
Yeah, I think so. I think you'd have to think about the policy differently, whether you're talking about just getting like, your average resident to stop using a gas-powered lawn mower or leaf blower versus, a large campus that is managing, however, or like, the commercial shopping centers and big parking lots, they can blow everything. Yeah.
Jesus is unconvinced.
I'm not saying they shouldn't be regulated, it's just you have to like approach it differently.
Yeah, no, I def hear it. I'm like, if you got monies to buy lands, you got monies to buy a better option to take care of the lands. So that is my only like when and I know it's like nothing specific, but even when it comes to like recycling on the individual level versus the corporation level, and like the differences between those things. And so that was just my little but I also know it's a good place to start. And just as long as we're being like extra critical on the company, like the developers.
I appreciate that, thank you.
In general, I own electric lawn equipment, and it's like electric structure, lower maintenance, lower operation costs, once you invest in it. And if you get 100% wind power like I do, then it's all powered by clean electricity. So there's a solid case to be made for akin to electric vehicles.
I wonder what the price differential is too. I also just worry, like, with the ordinance, I didn't know a lot of those things were on the one edited, that like, there's regulations about when you can and can't use your AC above a certain noise. It's not like any of this is enforceable or have any funding for education. Like, funding for education or enforcement, similar to other policies.
Right. So people trying to support the plastic bag ban.
So, just flag that.
Yeah.
Red flag.
Yeah.
And it seems like the more nuanced the policy is, the harder it is to, like, enforce. So like, it's a decibel thing versus just like, you cannot have this in a residential zone thing, that seems like. I could imagine some neighbors having like a little decibel meter where they're like.
I'm sure we all have one on our phone.
Oh, yeah, we probably do. Two other things I'm gonna share, and then we can totally move on. One is, I guess three, but I'll be quick. One is, do we wanna try and define environmental justice in ordinance? I feel like that, you were talking about that when we first walked in, but it's come up at the state level too, just like when we talk about not doing things in environmental justice zones or in, like, would it be helpful if we like had a shared definition? Or would it be unhelpful, because then I could see it actually going the other way.
Well, I think I think something a green justice zone should be thinking about, and like, but also, so like that, and I think we are thinking about that. But when I think about a definition like that, it's often related to a specific policy, because then it starts to dictate like things you can and can't do. So I think that gets into the zoning. So I think it should be developed in concert with like a zoning change that is talking about, you know, specific rules for an area.
I like that pairing of it, of the zoning with the EJ definition.
Yeah, but I think in general, just thinking about how Providence wants to define environmental justice is that would be like half the battle for such policy, you know what I mean? So like, it's definitely starting to think about.
And it seems like maybe I mean, it's not my place to make that definition suggestion, but it seems like for timing wise, while we still have Mayor Lorza, and it just seems like that would be something to try and announce to people who support the climate justice plan and things like that. Not that the next mayor won't be, but we just don't know, because we don't know who that person will be.
And if I could just quickly add that I also think at the state level, like the climate justice plan is referred to all the time. So I think this could be also an opportunity for the city to set sort of the framework that the city would like the state to reference, because that's already happening. It's just not, you know, it hasn't been passed through legislation or regulatory process.
And since the state law, the Act on Climate Law requires, there are some environmental justice pieces built in. If the city wants to take the leadership role in defining what that means, there might be a chicken and egg where like, if not, the state might do it, and will the city like, how the state defines it? I don't know.
And then what happens if the city defines it and the state comes out and defines it differently?
Yeah, it's like a can of worms, but. One other thing I'm thinking, actually two other things. One is, so Representative Kislak, this year sponsored state legislation to try and regulate, well, first it was just a ban, but then we moved to be more nuanced with regulating neonicotinoid pesticides. It did not pass. It passed the House, it didn't pass the Senate. It's gonna try again this year, but I wonder if there's something more, like at the city level, the city can't regulate pesticides, like they can't regulate pesticides in the same way that DEM can, but I wonder if I have no idea, I really just thought of this just now, so I can do some homework on it, but I wonder if there's something that the city could do around neonicotinoid pesticides or other types of pesticides. We haven't, as a state, regulated new pesticides since I've been born. It's like a true thing, it's been almost 40 years, and like the bee populations are just getting decimated, so something that could go along with the pesticide-free PBD, like a next step, might be an idea. And then one final thing, just to build on what Priscilla was saying earlier, I wonder if there's something, and I don't know if it's an ordinance or, I don't know, I'd have to think about this more, but at the state level, a lot of us have been talking about how do we build climate into all policies. So, you know, with new housing, making sure that all new housing, if there's public housing, it's like maximally efficient and solar powered and all the things. Or if there's like a city level thing that could be similar, like climate in all policies, like, okay, as we build out, I don't know, I can flesh this out more, but as we build out like new infrastructure and things, like climate is taken into account, and you have to, so in any sort of zoning change or in any sort of building permit or whatever, you have to take into account the climate of what you're trying to do. So I can think about that more, but that's just something we've been talking a lot about at the state level, and I feel like the city could.
My thought on that is I think we have to be more specific.
Yeah.
For it to actually be effective, and to target, like, maybe we want to focus on a CIP, right, or like big investments, or like where it matters most, because like we can't control the building code, so we can't just say like, oh, like, because we have climate in all policies, that means, you know, people need to build with climate in mind, because we can't regulate that. So I think like finding where we really have the levers to do that, and focusing on specific policies that do just that are enforceable.
Or to like if you get any incentives from the city or something, like if there's any sort of like.
Well, I wanted to include it in TSA, so if we do, if anyone gets funding or tax breaks, then they have to go above and beyond on building energy efficiency.
actually was brainstorming what policies we could do, and there's a restriction where it has to be a state level, the restriction of sales, in the city. And so, and the only other avenue I see is starting with city government and restricting pesticide purchasing and use, and then I think it would be tough to start with residences, like, we're talking about large buildings and areas, like, large people who manage a certain amount of green space, like, same approach as like repower.
Yeah.
Like encouraging the largest green spaces to opt out and take the pesticide-free pledge anymore.
Yeah.
But,
That might also be helpful too, for like the state level, the big push against it was from the landscaping companies. Because it would require another level of certification. They don't like it. So if there are some of the big companies who use these landscaping companies who are then saying, like, no, that could help, like, push the.
That's when I got a text from one of our people who's on the
Oh,
call.
hi, people.
And they were asking about public comment, and we only have 10 minutes left if we're only going to 5:30.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for flagging that and for watching your text.
Yeah, thank you for looking at my phone while we're gonna.
Yeah, that was really helpful, and also time is passing quickly, so I apologize. Yeah, we will totally do public comment in a second. Does anyone else have any final things about the ordinances? Okay, I've made eye contact with everyone. This is way better than on Zoom where I'm making eye contact with you and have no idea. The fourth agenda, I'm gonna quickly skip back, we're gonna come right back to it.
We can send that via email if you want. We can send out, I just have dates pretty
Oh,
much.
cool. If you send me dates, I'll email them to everyone. Perfect. For the discussion and guest presentation about infrastructure and climate justice and resilience, so Seth Handy was gonna come and talk with us about a proposal that he has, and apparently he has not come. So you're not gonna get that presentation. I will follow up with him to see what's up. He was very excited about it. But the idea of this in general also was this is what we were gonna mainly talk about last month, but there are sources of funding that exist now, / are coming down the pike with like federal infrastructure funds. There's the ARPA money, which Julian's been on the ARPA task force, which is really exciting. We have presented to the ARPA task force, recommendations from the Office of Sustainability, just recognizing that there are these opportunities arising with infrastructure funds and potentially other sources of funding that could be large, wanting to make sure that the commission and others are thinking early about how we could best take advantage as a city of those opportunities. So it's not one of those situations where it comes and it's like a rush, and then it's like, nothing gets done and we waste a lot of money. Or Rhode Island doesn't get any of that money. And so for a lot of the federal stuff too, my understanding, which could be faulty, is, there'll be matching funds that are required, or there will be, anyway, it'll be, without a plan, other states and cities could easily take all of the money. And so just wanting to make sure we have on our agenda, maybe also in the future, maybe when we report out about the municipal resilience program process, like, that there's some conversation that we have here, and I know Leah and her team already talked about this, but like, about how we could use those funds in the city and like build support for those types of programs. So like, if it comes down to the CIP process or however that funding gets put through the city, that we're prepared and can use it for climate resilience and climate justice and all the things. But, we're almost out of time. Maybe that's another conversation we have in a more, robust way in a future meeting, and let's folks have initial thoughts now.
What's the timeline? I keep hearing people say it's coming, and then it's like.
I think we don't know, we
How do we
haven't
know?
asked the federal government yet. Do you know, Julie?
I don't have on the federal side of things, I do have I can keep it pretty brief in terms of updates from the ARPA funds for the city in terms of where things stand with that, 'cause I think there are some kind of important connection points on it. So really briefly, and I won't get into a lot of details, there's a report coming, a draft should be ready, by next week, and next week, Friday, the task force will be kind of voting to approve the report that's being developed that came out of it. We had weekly meetings since July, lots of different presentations from most city departments and a lot of community presentations as well. Where the task force kind of voted in terms of allocation was mostly along the lines of what the kind of community, there's a kind of robust community engagement process, and like over 1,000 people filled out surveys. the breakdown of those, amounts, so it was a total of almost $112 million that is kind of after the city takes out the parts that are for revenue, kind of like the lost revenue from the pandemic. And it broke down along kind of percentages. We increased housing a bit. Housing was by far the biggest priority, and so we set it as a minimum of 25%. I think it was like 22% is what it came in as. So we had a minimum of 25% of that going towards housing and kind of working on the details of what that would look like. And then the other percentages, I just have this here in front of me. So under the kind of final thing we had with it was sustainability came in at 10.28%, which is just under $8.5 million going towards sustainability initiatives to be kind of encumbered and kind of over the next couple of years, so pretty soon. There's also like 13% going towards racial equity, which was a pretty broad one, so kind of making sure that racial equity is built into every single one of those categories, but that there's a separate set aside for things like the city's reparations program is a big part of that. So a lot of the details, we kind of kept it pretty high level. The details we worked out some level in the report and what goes, the back and forth between city council and the mayor's office around what is there. But just wanted people to kind of keep an eye on that kind of advocating that the community priorities, which are really based around racial justice and environmental justice and kind of prioritizing funding for the communities that were hardest hit by the pandemic, that, at the end of the day, city council holds a lot of decision-making power in this, and that people should keep it on their radars to let people in city council know that they should kind of go by what the community prioritized. So that was what there. One thing that really stuck out at me in terms of, in addition to, all the different priorities that came forward, I had no idea how bad the sewer system is. It was bad. So like, the presentation, they're saying it's gonna take like $20 million just to kind of clean it out and get a sense of like where things are. The pieces that I didn't know about with it were that we all pay a sewer bill, but that bill goes to Narragansett Bay Commission, which owns just like 10% of the sewer lines. And so the other 90% is owned by the city, and our sewer bill doesn't even pay for that. So it comes out of the city budget, and it's been chronically underfunded for years. So like the pipes were designed for 50 years, and they've been out there for like 100 or so. They're cracking, they're leaking, they're all clogged up with all kinds of stuff that's in there. And there's a real risk for like sinkholes, raw sewage seeping out, stuff backing up into people's homes. Like, it is really bad, and it's been in violation of like, there's been like consent decrees around it. So I was asking about like other money from EPA or DEM or infrastructure funds for it, and they said because the city's been in violation, grant money can't be used to pay for it. Like, we can't get more grant money because the city's in violation, because it needs to fix the issue first. So that was a kind of like...
And that's sort of the reason behind the stormwater utility conversations of creating a stormwater utility, because all of the, is that correct, Leah? No?
No, it wouldn't even have addressed the sewer issue. That would have created a separate utility for the stormwater system, but not the sewer system.
The sewer system's like connected to our home.
Doesn't that all just go to the Narragansett Bay Commission?
No. So part of the city is part of the city is on a combined system, which is Narragansett Bay, which is sewer and stormwater, and then there's lots of the city that is a separate system that's sewer and stormwater. The sewer pipes are maintained by the city, does go to Narragansett Bay.
Yeah.
The stormwater pipes, also maintained by the city, just go to the bay.
Right, that's what the stormwater utility was for.
Yeah. Stormwater side. Not the sewer side.
Right, okay, well,
It could be, a funding stream for both, it just wasn't.
so we're just talking about the sewer pipes that are city-owned, that are going to the Narragansett Bay Commission?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's not like theoretical, like there were sinkholes in Ward 2 this summer that just opened up.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, there's one around the corner from my house.
Cool.
So,
You should just get Narragansett Bay Commission to take them over?
That would be great.
You know, the money going to that? 20 million for the separate
It's
sewers?
unclear kind of which, some of it probably will be. out of 111 million, putting 20 towards that is like a huge chunk of it, so I don't see all of it, and kind of whether it's coming out of city services infrastructure or out of sustainability, it sounds like there's already some of the initial kind of tranche that went out that went towards that. And there's like 3 million or something that went towards like the initial, like they cleaned out just a little section of it and got like 30 tons of waste. So anyway, that was a kind of eye opener for me, but,
Yeah.
more to come.
Yeah, so, future conversation around infrastructure, and then we already discussed the recruitment of new members, but as a reminder, you also have to make the application for new members, so please share that widely. And we typically try not to have multiple members from the same board, but like just share it widely and we'll figure it out. There's 15 boards and like 15 of us. And I'll put that back in your inboxes so you have it at the top. And let's also take some public comment. Does anyone have their hand up? It sounds like someone must because they emailed Amelia. Oh, hey Doug. Love Doug.
Hello,
Hi Doug.
you can hear me.
We can hear you loud and clear. Yay.
So I wasn't sure how this worked because it's this hybrid stuff. So it's great to be here. It's great to see you guys, all together. You're making such a big difference in the city, and I'm just a big cheerleader for what you're doing. So thank you. And Sue, I'm going to send you a dozen roses for the work that you've done. I don't know if you're allergic to roses, but I think you have just served this now commission so well. So thank you for your time and your generosity, your spirit, your openness. I mean, it's phenomenal. It's just phenomenal. You're one of my new role models. Thank you.
Oh, no, that makes my whole day. Thank you so much.
So anyways, I sent Sue an email because I wasn't sure if my hand raised, if you saw it or if you could see it or if we were going to get comment or whatever. So a couple things. With the affordable housing discussion, I would urge the commission to figure out a way to make certain that these affordable housing options have solar that benefit the residents, have solar capacity, and they're not just on fossil fuels. And the other is that the residents have access to on-site raised garden beds so that they can grow food for themselves. And so let's think about where does that have to go? And there may be other things that you folks might want to add to the list as we're becoming more green and looking to become more resilient and more climate friendly. So affordable housing, what it was before, isn't and doesn't need to be the affordable housing of the future. It cannot be. It cannot be. Affordable housing needs to be something that assists people to get more on their feet in a variety of ways. Anyway, so that's one point. My other point was a discussion on the Port of Providence. I went, oh, okay. So I attended the legislative redistricting committee meeting at the PCTA last week. And because I just wanted to learn, and the census has been done. They showed these maps. One of the maps has had a big red area around the port. And that meant, and they spoke about that meant that the port area has lost population, which means that their mandate with the census is to look at these areas that lost population and do the redistricting. It may mean that this area around the Port of Providence will lose funding for the next federal funding for the next 10 years. So I just want to get that on your map. And that is really concerning. I don't know the exact boundaries of this red area around the port that has lost population. And I don't know exactly if it includes the area of the neighborhood that's the 9th highest asthma rate in the country. And I spoke of this to the legislative committee, to just be aware that, you know, if there is a child who has really bad asthma in this area, and this area loses funding, that next 10 years could be the entirety of that child's life. So it's really serious. And so a couple things. And so thank you for listening to that. I hope it's valuable information. And I am cheering you all on about more public access to the waterfront in Washington Park and South Providence. And we're kind of chipping away at seeing that come to fruition, at least in the projection and planning stages of the discussions that we're all kind of having with each other. Thrilled to have the port on more people's agenda, thrilled to have affordable housing, and thrilled to have waterfront access. Thank you very much. That's it for me.
Thank you, Doug. That's really
Can you see me?
No, we can't see you. But we
You
hear you.
can't see me? Oh, too bad.
We're missing out, Doug.
All right, great.
Thank you, Doug,
Thank
for the
you.
kind words. Yeah.
What'd you say, Jesus?
Just thank you for the kind words and the information.
Thank you for the information, Doug. That was really helpful. And really upsetting that that would be less funding for that area, just as we need more funding in that area.
So potentially, so, you know, it needs, you know, we don't know, you know, anyway, so I just wanted to send out a potential alert around that.
Thank you. Does anyone else have their hand raised? Okay. Awesome. Well, does anyone else have anything, any commission members have a comment? Okay. I don't think we're required to have a motion to adjourn. I feel like it's something you told me. So we can just like have a motion.
Yeah, motion.
Yeah, hey, Suze, we have a motion. And then we can.
I make a motion.
We're motioning.
Like an episode of Parks and Recreation.
Oh my God. I'm rewatching Parks and Recreation, and I'm just gonna recommend y'all do that.
It's, yeah, AKA a webinar.
Yeah, AKA. Okay. There being no other business, I propose we adjourn the meeting. What is this joke called? Yeah.